Recording in progress.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Board of Investments regular meeting on Wednesday, March 12th.
Thank you, Mr. Green. This meeting is being, do you want to do, what do you want to do? Do you want to do pledge allegiance and then I read? Or?
Go ahead.
Okay. This meeting is being conducted as a virtual meeting and virtual and in-person meeting. So we'll do a roll call of the trustees to confirm attendance. Ms. Ginsburg? Here. Ms. Mee? Yeah. Ms. Langton? Here. Mr. Jones?
Present.
Mr. Rue?
Here.
Ms. Martin? Here. Mr. Gatto?
Here.
Ms. Martinez?
Here.
Chair Green?
Present.
Thank you. Staff participating in the meeting includes the following: CIO John Grable, Deputy CIO Jude Perez, Deputy CEO Louis Lugo, AEO JJ Popovich, Chief Counsel Stephen Wright. Investment staff include Esmeralda Del Bosque, Pache Masarajian, Chris Wagner, Catherine Tun, DDA Acevedo, and Calvin Chang. We also have several consultants on site: Stepstone, Alborn, Makita, and that's it.
Excellent. Ms. Rye, would you lead us on the Pledge of Allegiance?
Okay. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Ready to do a teleconference?
Yes, we have two trustees participating under AB 2449. Trustee Jones, will be participating by teleconference for just cause contagious illness. Trustee Jones, can you please confirm if there's any individuals 18 years or older present in your location? Okay, maybe stepped away. Okay. Trustee Mee, can you please confirm if there's any individuals 18 years or older present at your location?
Nobody else in this house.
Okay, thank you so much.
Excellent. Moving on, we need a motion to approve the minutes from February 12th.
Okay, Ms. Ginsburg?
Yeah.
Ms. Mee?
Yes.
Ms. Langton?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Rue?
Aye.
Ms. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Gatto?
Aye.
Ms. Martinez?
Yes.
Chair Green?
Aye. As a point of order, Mr. Jones is back on.
Mr. Jones, can you please confirm if there's any individuals 18 years or older present at your location?
My wife is in her home office downstairs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yep.
Public comment?
We actually received a written comment from Mr. Kelly, which was emailed to the trustees last night and will be part of the minutes.
Excellent. Thank you. And moving on to item 6, executive update.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, trustees. This morning, I will spend a little bit more time and present the updated CIO report. The report is more focused. We tried to improve visuals. It'd be great if we could pull it up, which would be, I guess that's an aspect of the visuals in it. We, in the report, elevated the OPEB trust. We added some perspective that this report is a snapshot of a month's end. And as we just heard in the equity committee, many of our assets price quarterly. So a month end in some instances is arbitrary. We also manage the pension for a longer term objective. So, it's important to look at it on a monthly basis, but we need to keep that in perspective of our longer term objectives. Thanks to two groups of people for helping update this. The first is our portfolio analytics team, which works on this every month. So thank you. And also last summer, we had a project for two of our interns to canvass the country and look at all the CIO reports they could find and add some suggestions for things that we can use to improve this. So thank you to our summer interns, and we look forward to future summer interns. So now we'll begin on slide 4, and we can start walking through the updated report. So this slide has some notable items and market themes. Once again, this is a reformatted slide. This slide existed in the old version, but it's just kind of some icons and better visuals. The keyword on the slide this month is uncertainty. I discussed the topic in detail last month, so I'll rediscuss uncertainty this month, in that there's significant amount of policy uncertainty, which is driving economic reactions and re-reactions. And some of those include inflation, which may be resulting in moderating economic prospects, higher unemployment. We're starting to hear people talk about the combination of that in stagflation. There's a lot of uncertainty around government revenues. Tariffs are topic du jour of when, how much, responses, once again, responses, responses, and it's a lot of uncertainty surrounding that. Taxes will come into the fore in terms of potential changes as the 2017, I believe, tax cuts expire later this year. Corporate actions, which are a big driver to economic output. Corporate actions, be it mergers and acquisitions. Also in the Equity Committee, we discussed CapEx, we discussed regulations and the impact that has on be it private or public companies. And as a result of the current environment, there may be some inactions. Inactions may result in a hit to corporate earnings. It's starting to manifest itself with less corporate confidence in the C-suite of companies. And in some sense, that may become self-fulfilling in terms of the consequences it has. Also, some market themes relate to the Federal Reserve and interest rates. What is the next direction in rates? Is it a pause? Is it down? That all is maybe less certain. Let's turn to slide 5, please. The charts on the top are the benchmarks for the two main drivers of our portfolio, global equity on the left, as represented by the MSCI ACWI IMI index, that is our benchmark, and investment grade bonds on the right, as represented by the Bloomberg US Aggregate Bond Index. Beneath the charts on the top is a heat map. The heat map is designed to better visualize market movements across a larger set of relevant asset category indices. Positive numbers are a darker shade of blue. Negative is a more robust red or orange or whatever color it may be on the screen. The chart details performance for the month end February. Specifically, global equity was down. What we can see from the heat map is that calendar year to date, non-US equity markets are outperforming US markets, which is reversing a trend. Bond portfolios had a higher return as yields came down in February. The aggregate bond index was up 2.2% for the month, 4.8% fiscal year to date. And those types of returns associated with bond portfolios is significantly above our expectations. Once again, bonds are our portfolio ballast and are designed, are part of our risk reduction portfolio. If we were to, once again, take a moment in time, not of as of the end of February, but if we did it as of March 11th, 2025, the colors on this slide would probably be a little more vivid. And where they'll be at the end of the month, I don't know and will not speculate. Turn to the next page, please. On this slide, we highlight some salient macro indicators. And going clockwise from the top left, GDP or gross domestic product. We could see that over 4 years or so. The chart on the top right compares trends in inflation, unemployment, and labor participation. Maybe the most relevant chart on this page is maybe I'm going out of the clockwise order that I indicated, but is the cost of capital, which is the market yields in U.S. Treasury securities. The cost of capital is represented by the relative movement in interest rates, really is how we design our portfolio. And it's that we want to maximize the return per unit of risk. And as goes the cost of capital, the calculus changes potentially over time, not in any 1 month, but over time as it relates to the relative movement between asset categories. And then the last chart on this page is the movement year to date of the US dollar and some other major currencies. We could turn to slide 8 and go through a section on performance and risk for the pension fund. This chart is very similar to the prior version of the CIO report. And this is as of the end of January. The fund was up 1.3% net for the month, as we can see in the upper left-hand corner. The market value of the fund was $82.2 billion. Cash was at a very comfortable $1.2 billion as of the end of the month. And then our functional asset allocation is seen on the right in what we refer to as a donut chart. There's a new chart on this slide in the top middle. That chart shows the growth of $1 invested in the fund beginning 5 years ago. So that dollar is the light blue line, and today that dollar invested 5 years ago is worth $1.49. And that $1.49 is compared to our benchmark and to a 60-40 reference portfolio. Oftentimes we talk about kind of what the market can give you with a readily available portfolio of 60% equities, 40% bonds. And we can see over the last 5 years, there's been nice outperformance compared to our custom benchmark as well as that reference portfolio. And in most of the numbers that we have in the CIO report and the quarterly performance book that we'll review later this morning is expressed as percentages. And that $1.49 isn't expressed as a percentage. On the next page, and we don't have to turn yet, but that same number is expressed as 8.3% annualized over 5 years. So when you see, we returned 8.3% over a 5-year period annualized, that sounds good. That's above 7%. But when you think about it as $1.49, that adds kind of a different perspective to the same number. And I think showing returns, showing our performance in different formats, I think really helps to translate that performance and put some more perspective behind it. So let's turn to the next slide to have some more detail on total fund performance. I think there's some great information on the slide, and in many ways, it's kind of, I'll smile as I say this, it's kind of the money slide. The top of the page is a chart called a histogram with 120 observances, which is 10 years of monthly performance for the total fund. The bars on the top stack those monthly returns in intervals. So for example, the tallest bin or the tallest bar has 56 months with returns between 0 and 1.9%. And I think that the chart I'm looking at may be slightly incorrect upon what's on the page, but we'll fix this going forward to next month. I want to make sure that the intervals in the bottom are correct because it doesn't look like it is. I'm going to read through my notes, which are precise. The tallest bar has 56 months of returns between 0 and 1.9%. And January 2025 at 1.3% should be on part of that stack. The chart on the upper right shows some statistics associated with these returns. For example, our average monthly return over the past 10 years is 6.5%. And that's compared to 0.6% is the modeled return based on our capital market assumptions used in our most recent strategic asset allocation. The standard deviation is the volatility of our returns over this period, and that also is listed as 2.02%. And then we also show what the highest return month is, which was the highest return month is 6.6%, which was November of 2020. And then the lowest return months was 5 years ago, which was negative 6.9%, which was the month that the pandemic was declared. I think the anniversary of that may have been yesterday when the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic. Now to zoom out a bit, the last 10 years have been very strong from an investment perspective, notwithstanding that pandemic. Whereas our models indicate an expected monthly return of about 60 basis points, our experience has been above that. Our experience is also positively skewed, meaning that they're more frequently positive than negative months. And that really is important for a mature pension. So going to the data, and once again, I'm going to profusely apologize for this chart may being incorrect compared to the observations, but 28 of our 120 observations, which is 23% of those months, represent months with monthly returns above 2%. Returns above 2% are fantastic. That compares to 12 of 120 observations, or 10% of the time our loss was more than negative 2%. So it's more than a 2-to-1 ratio of outstanding versus very bad. So I think that's something that I think helps ground us in tough environments like we're experiencing this month, where you look at the headlines of the newspaper or the evening news and they say that the sky's falling. We've seen a lot just over 120 months. Look at going back even longer in time, and I think it really helps ground us and put in perspective that we've been there, done that, and we don't need to overreact to any one situation. So the bottom of the page now shows the returns for the fund, our functional asset categories, and our benchmarks over various time periods. Fiscal year to date, the fund is up 5.2%, ahead of our actuarial pacing. Credit is our best performing asset category over this period at up 7.3%. Private equity, which we just had a long discussion about, has materially lagged the benchmark over the past couple of years. And 1 month doesn't make a trend, but that underperformance reversed itself in January. So I guess small victories, small celebrations, hopefully that continues going forward. And we'll have more detail about quarterly performance later in the agenda. And so now we can move to risk, which begins on the next slide. You can go forward 2 slides, please. Great. So this chart shows 2 aspects of total fund risk. Forecast volatility, which is how much we estimate that returns will fluctuate. And then active risk, which is the difference from our implementation and the benchmarks in our strategic asset allocation. So I'll start with volatility. And our volatility, which is the top part of the page, is close to that of our benchmark. And that's because our actual allocations are very tight to our targets. And much of this is attributed to the cash overlay that we use. In the top middle, we can see that growth assets make the largest contribution to forecast volatility and risk reduction the least. So growth, as we can see in the chart in the dark blue, is about 49% of our capital weight. And in the chart next to it is 80% of our risk. So there's a higher weight per dollar invested. Growth investments can have very high returns, but there's the potential for loss. And that's the investment risk that we take with growth assets. In contrast, risk reduction is about 24% of our capital and contributes about 4% to volatility. So there's a lower weight per dollar invested, and we expect more predictable outcomes. And this is why when I mentioned that fiscal year to date, risk reduction or the bond index was up 4.8%, that's not what we anticipate with what are our safe assets. And this really is the basic design of our strategic asset allocation. On the right and the top, we can see that volatility is trending down. And the main reason is that we have increased our allocation to investment grade bonds over the past year. On the bottom, we have some aspects of active risk. And active risk has two main components. The first is allocation risk, which is associated with tactically tilting the portfolio away from strategic targets. And that's something that we don't intentionally do. That's part of our investment beliefs that we don't do that. And selection risk is associated with security weights that differ from our benchmarks. And as we can see in the chart in the middle on the bottom, that most of our active risk is in our real assets portfolio. And a lot of that has to do with our benchmark and our implementation, in that real assets is the least indexed of our functional asset categories. Growth, we index a lot of public equity. In risk mitigation, we index a lot of investment grade bonds. This is the aspect of our portfolio of size where there's the least amount that's indexed. As we can see in the chart on the bottom right, that forecasted active risk has trended down. Once again, same reason as forecasted total fund volatility. A lot of that has to do with an increased allocation to investment grade bonds. Investment grade bonds are designed for portfolio beta or to meet the benchmark. And it's really designed to preserve capital against a downturn in equity markets. And that's not where we allocate total fund risk. There's also another technical aspect to why this is trending down, is that with time, with better information about the portfolio, the models that we use have better data. And with better data, we have a more accurate read. So in some sense, the forecasted active return may have been slightly overstated in the past.
Mr. Grable, if I may, I have a quick question on that middle chart. And we were talking about the lack of indexes for the real asset and inflation hedges. Would you mind expanding on that? Is that just that the market doesn't have those type of indexes that are comparable to our real assets and hedging?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The benchmarks exist. The implementation per the structure review is not to passively invest that. So we could do that, but the chosen implementation of the board per the structure reviews is to pursue more active mandates. And with active mandates, there are going to be differences from the underlying benchmark. I don't know if that made sense or not.
I'm trying to follow. So, but I think that goes into what you're talking about with how the active risk trend is going down, because though we don't have something up front to base decisions off of for that class or that area of our fund, but as things present themselves, that data is altering the
middle, bottom, and the bottom right charts show two different things. The middle is as of the end of the month, what the active risk forecasted is for the fund. And of that, the largest component is real assets and inflation hedges. And that is the largest component of it because that asset category is all actively implemented except for a smallish allocation to Treasury inflation protected securities. If we were to have a dozen instances of that middle chart over the last 12 months, that's what we show in the bottom right of how that total active risk has trended over time. But the chart in the bottom right doesn't account for the various components of active risk over time, if that clarifies it anymore.
I'm trying to follow. I don't want to get in the weeds and take up too much time. I just was, very curious about the indexes that would be utilized for that monthly snapshot in the middle slide. That's all.
And the way this is calculated is we try to have transparency to as much of the fund as possible, to the individual securities that we own. And then in the risk engine that we use, that's then compared those individual securities to the benchmark. And the calculation of active risk is calculated based upon the differences between the benchmark and our actual holdings. So it's done, and over time, we have more transparency than we did, be it 12 months ago, 24, 48 months ago. We increasingly have more visibility into what our actual holdings are. And that's intentional.
Thank you.
So if we could turn to slide 11. If we can go back, pardon me. My slide numbers are off a little bit. If we can go back to, go back, total fund, yes, perfect, slide 13. So this is a new representation of our geographic exposure, and it's important to note that this is by country of domicile, not the location of sales or operations of a company. So for example, Apple Computer in this chart is 100% US, whereas half the revenue may be elsewhere in the world. So we can see from this chart that we have securities domiciled in over 70 countries. It says 72 markets on the top, and 95%, the outer ring of that, is in developed markets, of which 71% is in the United States. And geographic exposure is principally driven by the Board of Investments approved benchmarks. The benchmarks really determine what our allocation by geography is, and to the extent it differs, the prior slide and the chair's question about active risk, well, that's an aspect of active risk to the extent that we differ from the underlying benchmark. So now let's turn to OPEB, beginning in 2 slides. Let's go back. No, let's go back to slide 13. No, for some reason, the CIO report seems to be off a little bit. Let's turn 1 slide forward. Let's turn no. Oh, go back 1 slide. Let's go back 1 slide. Okay, this seems like it's the wrong version of the CIO report, but anyway, the slide 13 begins 4 slides that are new about OPEB. And the real focus is to draw more attention to the OPEB trust. And what should be in the package is a slide that shows the OPEB trust was up 2.0% net in January. The market value is $4.5 billion. And there is a growth of a dollar chart in the top middle of the OPEB performance slide, which shows that dollar compared to the pension, which was $1.49, OPEB was $1.40. And that's really a result of the pension, or the OPEB rather, having less active management. And so now let's hope, when I say let's turn the page, hopefully this will be the right page, where there should be the histogram for the OPEB trust, which may be a slide 12, I'm hoping here. So let's go back 1.
On our version, we have.
Okay. Okay, so what's being shown to the public is the wrong version?
Correct.
Okay.
We have the right.
They
Okay.
have the right order for advantage.
Okay, so the right version also compared to my histogram charts that,
Yes.
okay,
And don't worry about it. It happens to all of us.
okay.
It's happened to me before.
Okay.
So you're good.
So,
You know your stuff. Just
Okay.
keep going.
thank you.
John, they're gonna switch now.
Great. So, slide 14, I hope.
13. Oh, 14.
14, yes. Okay, great. So here we have a histogram at the top of the page, and there are several points that are worth noting. First, there is a lower min and a higher max. As I say that with more confidence because the slide's backing me up. The minimum over this 5-year period was negative 12.2%, which was March of 2020. And the high month was 8.6% in July of 2016. So this is related to the higher volatility of the OPEB trust that can be seen in the higher standard deviation on the top right of 3.26%. And the cause of that difference is a different strategic asset allocation, as well as a different implementation with more public market exposure. The detailed OPEB and functional asset category performance is on the bottom. Fiscal year to date, growth is the best performing functional category for OPEB at 9.1%. And now let's turn to slide 15. So slide 15 is the risk slide for OPEB. Is a similar format to the pension fund. Volatility is slightly lower compared to the pension. It's a function of the mandate. OPEB has a lower actuarial target of 6.25% compared to the pension's 7%. And given that lower actuarial target, less risk is necessary to achieve that threshold return target. Active risk on the bottom. Most of the active risk likewise is associated with real assets and inflation hedges. In some sense, this is an anomaly of implementation that as we transition to more active management, more private management in OPEB, we will move away from our historic implementation. So there is a bit of a mismatch between our benchmark and our implementation. Currently, we use mostly REITs for our real estate exposure. REITs are more volatile than our private market implementation will likely be. So as a result of that, virtually all of our active risk is associated with REITs in our risk in the portfolio. So now let's turn to the next slide, please. The graph here shows a geographic exposure for the OPEB trust assets. And once again, this is driven by our asset allocation, principally our benchmarks. And here it's similar. There's a slightly higher allocation to the United States than in the pension. But once again, that is driven by our asset allocation and our benchmarks. If we could turn to slide 18. The top portion is a new format with 2 waterfall charts. The bars represent rebalancing activities by functional asset categories for the pension and OPEB. And then the last bar in each of the charts show the net change for the month. So for example, the gray bar in the total fund section shows negative $317 million. And that is the sum of the rebalancing activities in the light and darker blue by the functional asset categories, including the negative $444 million for growth to the left. And it's important to recognize that it is negative for the pension and 0 for OPEB in that there are significant cash outflows that go to pay member benefits every month. So the negative number is representative of the amount that we use to principally pay benefits. Let's go to the next slide. This slide tracks some key projects for the fund and OPEB. The right column lists some personnel searches. And I would like to draw everyone's attention to the chart on the bottom where it shows 2 FA1 or Financial Analyst 1 positions, and the status is in development. As of tomorrow, it's going to move from in development to in progress. And I'm very excited, and maybe I'm putting pressure on everyone behind me. with this statement that tomorrow we're scheduled to launch our new Financial Analyst Fellowship Program. And for this program, we're seeking 2 individuals for 2-year rotational positions. We'll look to add 2 more next year, such that we have going forward 4 at any point in time. And the program will start with 1 year in our portfolio analytics group to gain an understanding of everything that we do. And then the second and final year in the fellowship program is a rotation into a specific asset category. So I'm really excited about the program. It's going to start tomorrow in terms of the recruitment for it. So people that may be listening or know of people that are interested, apply, and we hope to start it this summer at the beginning of the new fiscal year. So I'm very excited about that. I think that often we talk about, allocator to best-in-class investor. I think that this is another aspect of how we're growing as an organization. The next slide is a continuation of this section, and this shows some updates or changes with some of our asset management partners. In this case, we see firm name Napier Park. Napier Park is a credit manager, and then over the course of the month, they had a change in ownership, and so we disclosed that in the column on the right. Then the last slide I'll talk to is slide 21, which is the change in our fiduciary net position. This is a 12-month chart. Each column represents the changes in inflows and outflows for the pension. The number to the right of each bar is that net change, be it a positive or negative number for any given month. And this is a slide that we have historically had in the CIO report. We just changed the colors and the formatting a little bit of this. And then in the appendix, we have a staff chart of the month, an RFP, the quiet period list, and then something that we added, because I know that there was a request for it, definitions and disclosures. And the disclosures relate to the footnotes. So with that, I'm happy to stand for questions, and I appreciate everyone's patience while I fumbled through this.
Mr. Jones?
Good morning, fellow trustees. Let me just compliment you. I think from the first time I joined, and we used to deliver the huge pre-meeting agenda books manually through there, and having flipped through this, I really appreciate the arc of development of the presentation, John. So thanks very much to you and your team. I recall also having lunch with the 4 interns last year, and it's nice to know that a couple of them had an opportunity to contribute to the enhanced not only visual presentation but content presentation around this. I just wanted to compliment the team for doing that. That was it.
Thank you.
Ms. Mee?
Thank you, Trustee Green. Could you go to slide, it might be different slide number, the one that is geographic exposure. That slide. Want to make a comment there real quick. This is OPAT. The other one, if you can go there, speaker fund. Here. So this is a beautiful slide. I appreciate this showing, how we invest in global markets, right? My comment on this is, in recent few months, we have seen a lot of changes from our new administration. And then on top of that, the AI race, right? Technology competition, and then a lot of change out there. Tariff, changing the supply chain, geopolitics, so much change that I'm not sure if the world order is changing, but there are moments, there are changes, right? What come with changes is there could be opportunities and could be risks. So I'm not sure, if this is the environment that we should pay attention closely to observe and then to consider to evaluate our exposure, globally again, and see how we can position it to gain from this change in environment. You don't have to have an answer right now. Just a thought, just leave it with a thought, and that's it. Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair, if I might,
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, please.
if we can go to slide 9, I appreciate the comments from Trustee Me. If we can go to slide 9. If I were to estimate where we were this month to date, I would say that we're maybe a little, it's not a good thing to do, but a snapshot, thumb to the wind, would be somewhere just below down 1%. I don't know what the markets are doing today, but just say we're down about 1% month to date, in spite of all the noise, the discussions. I think that the news media kind of amplifies change. I think it makes for ratings. It makes for good copy. I think that a down 1% month is within our experience. There are many months where we would be down about 1%, and that would be on this chart. We see in the the bar with the 1.3%. If you go over 2 bars to the left, that's the bar where down 1% would be. So it's within our experience that it's not out of the ordinary. I think we should always be vigilant. But I think that we should be also strategic, because if we're going to try to time markets over fear or greed, there is the likelihood that we're going to be precisely wrong. And the board, I give a lot of credit to having durable investment beliefs, a durable process by which we evaluate our strategic asset allocation every 3 years that takes into account shifts in the market for us to react or not react to, and pivot the portfolio. So so we're always mindful of the environment that we're in, but I'm always cautious about the need to react, not react, or overreact to what the headline of the day is. But I do recognize, and I think it's consistent, Ms. Mee's comment, with how I started with the level of uncertainty in the market right now.
Thank you. Ms. Nee, thanks for
Thank you.
bringing that. And Mr. Grable, I my takeaway from the data and, in the context, is there anybody else, by the way? I don't want to. But in regard to the total fund, the OPEB, the historical net performance, and the performance summary in these charts, and I like the new ad that you put in with the monthly return net over the 120-month period. But again, and this is for the retirees and validation for the efforts by staff. The data is unrefutable. You cannot look at the data and understand that the investment strategy, policy, and the structure of it, with the diversification and the reallocation, and also too under that policy, like you just addressed, with the looking at the asset allocation, and is it prudent for the current market? But my short time on the board, I mean, it's roughly a $3 billion net gain to the fund, and weathering the 22, and I just want to instill confidence with anybody listening, retirees, active employees, this board and staff, that the model's working. It's it's not always gonna hit the big alpha, but some key points, the 2% roughly, you could call that our alpha. We are 2% above the market coming in. So it's working, and the efforts of staff, being understaffed, doing the things that they're doing, and the analysis, and the data is here. So I agree with you, Ms. Mee, that it is uncertain times, but I also agree that there's an irresponsibility of the media, you know, and really lathering things up for all the other points that were made. So, you know, as far as risk management, you know, I mean, what do they say? The first rule is not to panic. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to go into this market with clear heads, and fortunately, we have enough agility with staff that they're going to, I think, roll with it and bend like a reed in the wind, as they say. So as it comes. So that's my comments. Again, thanks for the presentation and to staff for doing this. And yeah, and Miss Me and the Valley Points and Mr. Jones, I think you're, you know, noting it too. But yeah, it's, you know, I think we're going to do okay. So thanks. Anybody have any other comments? Oh, Mr. Papa.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, trustees. So the member spotlight is a way for LACERA to recognize the public servants that care for the constituents of LA County. And it's also an opportunity for us to reflect on why we do what we do as we work towards empowering our members to enjoy a healthy and secure retirement. So this month, we are recognizing Stephanie Barnett, who is a clerical supervisor with LA County Child Support Services. She is retiring this month after 44 years in service. Incredible number of years of service, and she's worked in multiple departments throughout the county throughout her career. One of the things that she takes great pride in is their collaborative and respectful work environment that she creates. Both things that we can resonate here at LACERA with our values. She is proudest of her ability to help members navigate the child support system, which can be quite trying for some. It sometimes takes a lot of empathy, care, and those are also things that can resonate with us here. And so she's looking forward to retiring and spending time with her grandchildren and her family. Thank you very much, Ms. Barnett, for everything that you do.
Mr. Lewis, the executive report.
Yes, good morning, Chair Green. Good morning, trustees. Just a brief organizational update. First, we've concluded our divisional budget meetings. The budget team is getting ready for the Joint Organizational Governance Committee meeting, which is hot off the press, scheduled for April 23rd. So look forward to this group and our joint boards reviewing the preliminary budget, both administrative and as well as the retiree healthcare budget. Also, active safety member elections. Mr. Popowich is working with the Executive Office of the Board of Supervisors to start coordinating active safety member elections. And to reiterate, the Board of Investments has the 4th seat active safety member, and the Board of Retirement 7-seat elections. Tomorrow's our audit committee meeting, or audit compliance risk and ethics committee meeting, also known as ACRE. Encourage those that aren't on the ACRE committee to attend. It's going to be an educational session. The internal audit team as well as legal have done a good job of putting together a strong agenda with the committee chair, Trustee Martin. So I look forward to that meeting tomorrow. And with that, that concludes the brief organizational update report. So stand for any questions.
Miss Me.
Thank you, Chair Green. I want to make a comment on the upcoming election. It's important because involve our members. Elections, all our business because involve the members who we serve. I want to point out that appointed trustee is with the board supervisors authorities, not our. We shouldn't put our fingers and nose in their business, you know, unless they ask for help. However, when it comes to election, it's very important. And then I noticed from what I observed in the past few years, the retiree election to now is always great. It's about 80%. Right, that's what it should be, because it's some matter that the things that matter to people's life, you know, financial well-being and their family. So, however, when you compare the general member election in the past 2 years, the turnout rate is very, very sad. It's 8%. So to me, that's not acceptable. is equally important to general members, because just because they're not taking a paycheck today does not mean that it's not important, and does not mean that they cannot make a change to protect their money today. So I think the problem is the communication, how we send a message to the general employee, they're busy today. It might be not easy to reach them, explain to them why this matter, why they should vote. I think we can do a better, effort there, communicate to them, and then get them understanding to involve more and vote more. From my personal experience, I've been over the county for a long time. I did not know that I have the right to vote. I did not vote at all until I get to know LACERA in the recent year. Don't forget that our organization is named it as Retirement Association, which is already kind of misleading, right? So I want to point out that, and I hope staff to focus the energy working on that, improving our member service by reaching out to them, get a better turnout on election. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Missy. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, but we see it nationally, we see it in local elections, we see it statewide. There's just not as much, people exercising their voting rights. And you bring up a strong point with if there is potential for an outreach to communicate with the membership of LACERA, to ensure that everybody's aware that they have voting rights and can actively participate. It's a good point, but I don't know. I unfortunately, it's hard to say what would work. People are busy, and sometimes it doesn't. I don't know why there's not that much participation in voting, but it's a good point.
And through the chair, if I may, and we are actively working again with the executive office to make sure that we target, whether it's email, whether it's direct divisional communication with the departments, or even paper ballots. We know that resonates with a lot of our members. They like seeing that physical paper ballot. So we are looking at different modalities and making sure that we target and reach out to those that would be, voting for, and in this case, our safety membership. So we'll heed the comments and certainly take that back to the register recorders and the executive office for the Board of Supervisors to make sure we have ample outreach, as well as our responsibility to reach out.
And thank you for recognizing those concerns and the effort too. That's huge. And again, horse to water sometimes, as it were.
Sometimes it's the language they use in the email, right? The layman language might be better. What we use there in the past few years maybe is too official and too in the way that it doesn't explain to the common terms that why this is important, right? So why this is important, why they need to vote. So that's my suggestion.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Thank you guys for the presentations. Moving on to item 7, non-consent item. Item 7A.
Morning, Chair Green and trustees. Following the discussion at last month's meeting, this item offers 3 versions of the powers and duties for the board's consideration and action. They are all called powers and duties. They all include the same hours information as the current version. Beyond those similarities, there are some differences, however. Option A is exactly the same as the current version, except that it has updated portfolio values and adds the correct name of the Acre Committee. These are the types of changes that we have historically made to keep the document current. Option B is the same as option A, except that it introduces the concept of fiduciary duty on page 1, which is an important fundamental concept to recognize early in the document. Option B also adds additional language, recognizing that hours can vary from trustee to trustee based on various factors. The idea of recognizing the individual variation in hours is already in the current version of the BAI powers, so this is not a new concept. The proposed language in option B builds on the existing language and makes it more complete in terms of the causes of variation. Option C, and the final option, is a restated version similar to the one that was presented last month. However, it includes input provided by trustees to incorporate core concepts from the current version, such as the estimated number of hours and the additional time that may be spent on external activities and other issues as well. The document is reformatted as trustees suggested, with a larger font size, larger margins, and additional line spacing. For your information, last week, the Board of Retirement approved option B, which is their counterpart of the same option B that's presented to you today. And that completes my presentation. The board is requested to take final action today so that the approved version can be sent to the county for use in this year's election.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. I'd like to move to adopt, that this board adopt option B.
Second.
Thank you. We have some hands up. Do we go to a vote first, or?
We go to a vote first.
You should have the discussion first.
Okay, so the motion's on the table with a second.
Yes.
And Ms. Langton, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Steve Rice. I know he put a heck of a lot of time into these documents, and just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Jones?
Yeah, no, I was just going to originally make a motion for option C. That was in there, but we can go ahead and vote on B. I mean, my only comment on C is just, I think it's just a cleaner, more modern version than kind of the quote unquote compromise version that you see in B, but that's just my thought.
Well, actually, Chair, I like to back Mr. Jones's option C as well, for that to be considered. So I'd like to make a motion for you to consider that as well.
Okay, we have a substitute motion on the table for option C. Any seconds?
Well, Patrick Jones, and second was Ms. Martinez.
I don't think
Mr.
Patrick
Jones,
made the motion.
Mr. Jones, you made a comment? We have
Made a comment.
I wasn't sure if it was a point of order. I'd like to make, if I could make a substitute motion for C, but I didn't want to disrupt the initial.
Gotcha. Okay, so we have a substitute motion by Mr. Jones to adopt option C with a second by Ms. Martinez.
Nicole has a comment.
Ms. Nee, you have a comment?
Thank you, Chair Green. I do have a comment. In February meeting when the option C was presented to me, I compare with our current version line by line. C was being deleted, and I was very concerned. After the meeting, I had brief discussion with the staff, which made me even more concerned for the important context of being deleted. I want to make it clear and make sure everybody's on the same. One point is that with delegate authority from this board does not change this board's power and duty. The board's power and duty hasn't changed for 20 years and it's not changing today. So I want to make that point clear to staff. And then I also want to share with my the fellow trustee on the board of my concern is that with the version C, which is like describing the board power and duty with less power, less duty, with way too simplified version of it is dangerous. You know, everyone here, I see a full room of intelligent people. I'm sure you all understand the narrative is very powerful. Narrative form perception, and perception become understanding. Why a lot of us in the new trustee still learning about our roles on this board, changing our understanding of the power to less is very, very concerning to me, because I do not hope this transition that we're going through result in this board have less control and less oversight. There's something that we cannot afford to do, because we can delegate staff to do the work. The responsibility is with all of us. You know, 9 of us, every one of them's on it. And then we cannot afford to fail our nearly 200,000 members and their family to secure the pension fund. We have to continue to have strong leadership and strong oversight on this board from what we're transitioning from. This is very important. This duty statement wasn't changed for a long time because our previous experience board wouldn't even allow it. If you remember, our board before us, right, they went to court to defend our duties, defend our powers on this board to allow us to carry our duties. So this is a fiduciary duty board, not advisory board. So I caution every one of you, I believe in you to make that prudent decision. What's the right decision here? So I'm fine with option B. I see that changes, it is improvement. However, option C is dangerous.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Mee. Ms. Langton?
Thank you. I would agree with Ms. Mee as to the original option C that was presented to us. However, I do see that Steve substantially amended the new option C. He incorporated information that trustees had concerns about, me particularly. And I do see that it's still called powers and duties. It's substantively, to me, it's substantively the same as option B. I don't think this document changes any of our duties. I don't think it changes anything we do. This is just a public facing document. Our policies and our charter states what we do and don't do. That being said, the reason I would lean towards option B is because that's the option that was decided by the Board of Retirement. And I realize we are a completely separate board. We don't have to be subject to what they do, but we want consistency throughout our agency. And seeing as there really isn't a big difference between B and C, I would just encourage people to vote for B. Thanks.
Mr. Chair. Oh, sorry about that. Mr. Jones, sorry.
Mr. Jones?
Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure if you're, again, I was just going to respond similarly to Trustee Langton there, that just the read of the version that we saw last month and the version this month. Again, I'm sorry, I'm still a bit congested, but I thought as you would expect from Steve being the professional that he is, the incorporation of the suggestions to that. Again, I want to kind of step back from a context a little bit that's different from BOR. Part of our macro theme is best in class. And when we say best in class, that there's a variety of different touch points on that, not just what level of return we get, like best in class in terms of not only our public facing documentation, our internal documentation, there's a whole level of things that are there. And so when I look at version C, particularly relative to some of the other public facing documents from other boards of our size and otherwise, it looks more in keeping and in style with those than, without casting a pejorative about B just looks like it's a step or two behind. It looks like a compromise document versus more of a, hey, we're looking forward, this is the polish. And important just to recognize Trustees Mee's concerns, but like nothing in it that I can read from end to end changes any of the responsibilities or authorities or any of the other things that she seemed to have an honest expression of concern about at that level. So I just wanted to kind of like level set and trying to take some of the emotion out of it and just kind of think about this is a public facing document. In general, the best in class mantra that we hear consistently from Santos and from John is likewise, I think, reflected best in option C.
Mr. Rao?
Actually, I think Ms. Martinez was first.
I apologize, Ms. Martinez.
I see you, Chief. I see you. Listen, to me, I'm going to go ahead and agree with everything Trustee Jones just indicated. And I'm trying not to take insult to the fact that, yes, I'm new. And I want to reiterate the fact that staff needs to be able to do their jobs. That's what you get paid to do. And our job is specifically outlined for us. Whether you're voted in or you're appointed, you still have the same vote. My vote counts just as much as the people who are elected. So Trustee Jones is very on point with his assessment of this. And I just want to encourage us to, and remind us what we're here to do, not to overstep on what their responsibilities, because they're highly regulated, right? And because of that, and their licenses and everything that comes with it, we need to let staff do their job, and we need to be completely honest with the board as to what it is that we do and how long it takes us to do it. Okay, I know level of comprehension might be different, and understanding based on experience, but we all put in, we're here for a purpose. We can be doing something else with our time, but let's just be clearly and realistic and let staff do their job and we do ours. And we keep the lines of communication incredibly outlined, but what everyone does. And if we need a document to show that, in my belief is option C, and I'm gonna go ahead and agree with Trustee Jones. And I'd like to encourage all of us to do that, and let's be incredibly pragmatic about how we approach this. And that's, Chief, that's all I have to say. And I'm calling for the question.
Before I move on to you're calling the question.
I'm
Is there
sorry.
any opposition to calling the question? If so, it goes to a vote.
I think Trustee Bruce still has a comment.
Yeah, he
The
has
chair
a comment. I don't wanna interrupt him.
recognizes that opposition. So the question's been called. On the question, calling the question. Call the roll.
Wait, hold on. I just want to clarify, both for the record, for the audience, and for me, that the question that has been called is a motion and a second, the substitute motion for approving C. And we still have potential comments about B and whatever else that we're talking about.
Yes, sir. I think as a point of order, though, if the question's called without opposition, we go to the vote for the substitute, but I believe there's opposition on this, so it has to go to a vote on calling the question.
Opposition, so I get to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
Chair Green, just to
Yes.
clarify.
Thank you.
The motion would need a second, and then because it's terminating an important right of trustees, if there is objection, it requires a 2/3 vote in support.
Thanks for that clarification. So is there support for a second for the calling the question for Ms. Martinez? All right, seeing and hearing none, so the on the table calling the question is mute, and Mr. Rice, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have a question for either Mr. Rice, or I don't know if it's the chair or Mr. Rice. What happens if the BOI approves C, option C, while BOR approved option B? Is there a conflict?
No, there's no conflict. There are two boards, two different boards that take their own approach to their documents and their decision making. Both the two different versions, the version for the BOI and the BOR, would be sent to the county for inclusion in the election materials.
So it would be separate elections. So would in the election materials, would it have two separate?
Yes, because there are two seats open on the BOR and one seat open for this board. It's a consolidated election. So the BOR powers and duties is approved last week. Option B would be in the packet, and whatever version the BOI approves today would be in the packet as well.
Okay, so the voters will get voting materials, and then for the powers and duties for BOI would be different than the powers and duties of the BOR. I mean, it's essentially, if you read it, it's essentially the same, yet the formatting and the language is slightly different.
That's right, but I'm certainly not prejudging the outcome of the vote, but whatever the board decides to do, that version would be included in the election materials.
But it would have no relevance, or it would not impact how we operate, or?
No, it doesn't affect the conduct of the election, doesn't affect the access to information, the information provided by the BOR would be there, the information provided by the BOI would be there. So the voters would have the same information that they've always had as approved by the boards each year.
Okay, I mean, that relieves some of my concerns, but at the same time, I do want to I hear the efficiencies of option C. However, and I'm good with either option B or option C. But having heard the discussions from both having the perspective of both the BOR and the BOI, and having heard from a lot of the longer term serving trustees, especially on the BOR, I think that one of the bigger concerns some of the trustees had was the fact that this exercise was taken apart by staff, by a staff initiative, which I applaud staff on that. But at the same time, this turns out to be a sensitive matter for some trustees. And it was not directed by the board, BOR or the BOI. So there was some reluctance there and some concern by board members, even though it's trying to be more clear or mainstream. So there was a lot of discussion at the previous meetings at both particularly at the BOR as well as the BOI. So and there was a consensus on option B. So I'm a little concerned about ruffling feathers and having concerns between both boards. I mean, I think this is probably a topic more for the joint council at JCOG or at our next retreat, where both boards are convening together and we could discuss going forward on clarifying issues like powers and duties or any other delegated authority or anything like that. There is a contention between how delegated authority is presented in option A, B, and C. So, you know, I do want to respect my fellow trustees who are very sensitive to some of the language, no matter how minor it is. And there are concerns about it. So I think option B is what I'm going to support. But, you know, I think dragging it out like this in open is, again, something that should have been more vetted by in a forum where both boards could convene together. So, and I think that was one of the bigger concerns that I did, again, hear from other fellow trustees, that this was not an action by the board or directed by the board, but it was more brought by at the discretion of the staff. So,
Chair Green,
yeah,
can I address
I was
this
just
comment,
about
please?
to, it is actually it's the board's direction that this gets analyzed every year. It's just, you know, as a point of information, it's the board, the board directs staff to analyze all duties and responsibilities every year. Please clarify if
Yes,
I'm incorrect.
Chair Green and Trustee Rue and trustees, it's the responsibility of the legal office every year to make changes that are deemed appropriate and submit them to the boards for approval. And the board, of course, has the final decision-making power. And there's always discussion about the changes that are submitted. There were more changes that were proposed this year than in the past, but there have been significant changes proposed in the past as well. This is a duty of the legal office that I perform for the boards every single year. So it is something that is board directed.
So thanks. I do, Mr. Reyes, I think what Mr. Reyes is recognizing, to correct me if I'm wrong, is, you know, and you said it yourself, is the significant change to it. I think that's what's most shocking. Under Robert's rules, Ms. Me and Mr. Jones, I'm going to take a little chair preview and make my comments before we get back to you guys. I'm on now. So a couple of things on this. Yes, LACERA is unique in the fact, you know, between 37 and 77, we've bifurcated. Normally, most retirement systems under SERL don't have what we have. So, and there's a need for it. We're so big, and rightly so, and it's good. As far as you know, some of the issues here that have been brought forward, option B is a hybrid of the concerns that were presented by both trustees and staff, and I think it really hits the mark. You know, we have to value both trustee input with the comments that have been made and the CO's input as far as recruiting and retaining appointees and finding a viable candidate pool that will come here and do it. And those things aren't lost on this chair and someone that's directly affected by this duties and responsibilities, and not being self-serving. I, as the chair and also someone as a fiduciary, I have to recognize all the comments and discussion that were made for this stuff. Option C is not thorough enough in my opinion. I do feel strongly that option B facilitates all the concerns both by the CEO's office and by trustee staff. And I do think that it's important to recognize that. Ms. Martinez, also too, I want to address something you said that because you're new, I encourage everybody on this board, it doesn't matter day one or not, everybody has a voice and opinion and everybody's vote counts. And I applaud you for jumping right in and speaking your mind. And I hope nobody on this board ever presents that concern. So thank you very much for that. Those are my comments on it. I'm in support of B. And the last thing I'm going to close with is that Mr. Rowe brought up a point. We are separate boards, right? 1937 Board of Retirement, 1977 Board of Investment. And yes, two things will be going out. We've talked about voter participation, not being sure of stuff. I do feel that optics are important, and though the duties and responsibilities are slightly different between the two boards, I do recognize that some consistency in identifying the workload and addressing all the other concerns is important. And I feel that, even though we have two separate boards that operate independently, I've made this point before about optics, and I feel that, there may be room for this at the JOGC. Maybe this is something that needs to be bridged specifically for duties and responsibilities. I don't know if that's possible, but at least having the dialogue prior to this, because I see this as turning into a little bit of a mess. And
Chair, if I may too.
I'm almost done.
Okay.
So I want to point that out. That's my last point. That Ms. Martinez, if it's a rebuttal, I do need to go in order to Ms. Meehan.
It's not a rebuttal.
So that's all I have. Did you?
Yes, I agree with Trustee Rue on this one. If we must have a joint conversation, I'm going to go ahead and support that notion, because what's really concerning to me is the amount of hours that's explicitly outlined in these two options, right? We have to be forward-facing and completely honest with the public what this entails. And that's my concern. And that's my sticky point here. And that's where I'm trying to get at, because I can't go to my employer and tell them I spend all this time when in reality I don't. So I just want to make sure that we have this honest conversations with ourselves and with the other board if need be. So that's
and I think that's addressed, as Mr. Rice so eloquently put, that hours may vary, and that is I think that is a very fair thing to put forward in duties and responsibilities, that some hours may be, anyway, I must move on. Thank you, Ms. Mee.
Thank you for calling on me. I just want to respond to a couple points from Trustee Martinez. First of all, the one more women joining the board, I was thrilled to see you here. This is also Women's Month. So yeah, just in case it got me wrong, calling us new is not an insult. It does take a long time to learn, every one of us. Even today, I'm still learning. And then for your information, it's the first time we ever have that many trustees turn over all at once in history. We don't have overlapping of a longer, duration of trustee to help us with transition as much. That's why I have this concern. The other thing is, I said in the past, and I say it again, disregard elected trustee or appointed trustee, we, serve the same member. We all have the same fiduciary duty to all our members. There's no different. So we share the same fiduciary duty together, serving the same member. And then the other point is about, our decision and our role and the staff's role. So this is something that is the board's decision. The board's decision, this is not a staff's decision. And board made decision on this before and had the same discussion on this before. So this is the first time that staff proposed completely, override this statement for 20 years in the time that I do feel sensitive, because at the exact same time when we have so many new trustees turning over while we're still learning, at least I'm still learning, cannot speak on behalf of other people, right? So, and the other point about, this narrative, you're right, all other law documents and policy define a power duties, not this document. However, people are not going to read all those. People are going to read this one, the facing document. This is a narrative. If I send this copy, this version A or B to my employer, they have adequate understanding what I do on this board, and then have this document also has been the official document sent to our member for 20 years election and give adequate description of what we do on this board. So again, I support A and B. B, I'm totally fine with B. So that's my reasoning, and then I want to respectfully respond to Trustee Martinez. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. May. Mr. Jones?
Thank you again. So just other matter, having been the recent chair through here, and I realize we have a couple of members that serve on both boards. So I can imagine already having gone through a conversation with the vibe that may be totally different than the vibe we have on this board may kind of anchor your emotions or feelings on it. So I don't have the same encumbrances. So I'm just kind of acknowledging it without necessarily making a criticism or anything of that nature. I would just say, as a former chair, current vice chair on the board, I do view the vibe and our interactions with staff differently and respectfully different than the BOR. So I would express less concern that there be kind of absolute kind of consistency and reserve for the right for the Board of Retirement to say, hey, if we want let's say a slower, more plodding document that we feel reflects the best, great, right? And I wouldn't attempt to do that, but I wouldn't necessarily then say, when I think about the tempo and vibe of what we're trying to do and communicate about where we're going to $100 billion in assets. We're trying to attract the best to come here, best managers, best partners, all of that we would necessarily then look to kind of anchor that aspiration or that expression based on something different. So I just kind of wanted to say that, just give permission while we're having this, intra-board conversation here, for those of us who aren't on the BOR and haven't necessarily already been a part of a struggling conversation or a different kind of vibe of that, just to be able to look at this cleanly and just say, which is I think is what Trustee Martinez was saying, hey, I'm new. I don't come to this kind of burdened by whatever else was previously, around there. I kind of look at this as being a professional, really sharp representation from staff. I'm okay with that. Right. And I just want to, in the permission structure, for those of us who aren't on the BOR and participated previously, maybe voted previously for the other thing, to necessarily feel like we have to be anchored to that decision.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Ryu?
Mr. Chair, just quickly, I'm trying to land a plane here, and I agree with your concerns about getting it messy. So I just want to quickly point out that this is not an operating document, but more just like an introductory document, right? Especially for elections. And two, I just want to note the fact that there are clearly differences in need when it comes to viewpoints or recruitment or however you want to define that, between the elected members versus the appointed trustees. So obviously there's differences there. And three, would it be possible, Mr. Jones, if we could amend your motion to say that we adopt option B, but we take it to the next joint meeting or a discussion item for both boards to look into option C or consider option C at a later date. That way we could make sure we have some uniformity. And yes, we can have different documents, but at least when it comes to elections, we could have at least a unified vision as a board, even though we're two separate boards that are together. Would you consider that?
I'm not sure if I understand it, because I think, right.
He's looking for a revision of your substitute motion.
Yeah, I understand that part of it. I'm just trying to understand what the component of it is that we would go ahead, agree to be today, which I wouldn't be in favor of. I mean, if we happen to vote that way, then it happens to vote that way, right? So, I mean, it's obvious that I'm voting for C. I'm voting for something different. And I don't know from a timing perspective, if I recall correctly from the way Santos set this up originally, that this was kind of the meeting that we needed to have it for in order to have it on the supervisor's schedule by April, if I recall correctly. So I do think there was some kind of time dependent things on there. And then thirdly, just again, in the spirit of this too, is I just don't, I don't feel like the uniformity thing is like the main thing, right? And so I get why you may feel that way. Again, you serve on both boards. I see there may just be a different compulsion there. I just don't feel that uniformity with the BOR and their makeup and their approach necessarily has to govern. Not because we think we're better or anything of that nature. I just think we're different on purpose, and our vibe and tempo is different on purpose. And I'd like to see us continue to make decisions at times independent, perhaps differently than the best decision making that would take place at that board, right? So that we're independent for a reason. We still operate under a common umbrella, and I don't feel by choosing C we'd be vetoing B or the BOR's interest in that regard. I just think we would just be keeping with our own kind of tempo and vibe and kind of self-declared aspiration to be best in class. That's all.
Okay, well, if there's no more discussion, I
Through the
think,
chair,
yes,
if I
please.
just from a
Absolutely, please,
staff
thank you.
perspective, just want to, I know there was a few comments and I appreciate, I think it is healthy dialogue to have different perspectives. We think, I should say, but I think one of the things from a staff perspective and historically having two boards, that is very, very unique to LACERA. And for us, in terms of delineating the responsibilities of both boards is important, because one of the things we wrestle with is, does it go to the BOR? Does it go to the BOI? And creating that line in the sand is absolutely important. So in this instance, you know, in terms of the fiduciary responsibility, the governance and oversight, there are two different boards that have two different discharge duties. So I think it's important to highlight that. So I appreciate the comments that have been made in terms of the uniqueness of both boards. But I think from staff's perspective, we also approach things that way to make sure that we're bringing things to the attention to the right board to make sure that proper decisions are being made.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
my concern again goes back to the number of hours that are reflected on the responsibilities. That is my number one concern. And I want to make sure that's noted, and I want to make sure that goes on the record, because I have other responsibilities, as you all know, and I want to make sure my board doesn't think I'm spending full-time work on this, which I'm not. And I also would like to hear from the staff what it is that they recommend. I want to hear from them as well.
I would have to call a point of order on that. This is strictly a trustee board version. I think staff is responsibility here, though I respect your ask. I think it's a responsibility of staff to present the options, and I think not that not that there might not be value in it, but it really comes down to a vote, unless I'm wrong. Mr. Rice?
It's a board decision, but there's often dialogue with staff. So I'm happy to give my perspective on Trustee Martinez's question, if it pleases
Absolutely,
the board.
but if I may just, Mr. Lugo, one comment that you said real quick is that they are separate boards, but there's also a lot of overlay and generalized stuff. Fiduciary for both boards are necessary. again, I'll reiterate that I do feel that B addresses and is a good fit for both. I think that's why the Board of Retirement chose option B, and I think it's a good fit here. Mr. Rice, please.
Yes. We have a board-approved value of innovation in this organization, and the BOI has historically been very focused on best-in-class evolving. And when staff was thinking about what to do with the powers and duties this year and to do our job to present our best thinking to you, and that's what we regard our job as, present our best thinking to you as the final decision makers. We thought that this document really needed a refresh. And so we came up with the document that was presented last month after both boards' comments about it last month. We reconfigured it to make it bring in some of the elements of the current version, but still make it a fresh, what we believe to be more clear, a more easily digested, but in no way diminishing the responsibilities of both boards. So we believe that option C is worth the board's serious consideration, and that's why we presented it to you.
Ms. Martinez, would you?
I didn't know what he was going to say for the record either. So yes,
Sure.
Thank you.
So,
Do we go to vote now?
yeah, if there's no other comments on the substitute motion to adopt option C.
Okay, Ms. Ginsburg? No. Ms. Me? Ms. Me?
We voting?
Yeah.
I will no
Option
on
C.
C. I will never vote yes on C.
Ms. Langton? Yeah. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Martin? No. Mr. Gatto?
Nope.
Ms. Martinez?
Yes.
And Mr. Rue?
No.
And Chair Green?
No.
The motion fails.
All right, on the initial motion to adopt option B for duties and responsibilities.
Ms. Ginsburg? Yes. Ms. Me? Ms. Me?
100% yes.
Ms. Langton?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
No.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Gatto?
Aye.
Ms. Martinez?
No.
Chair Green?
All right.
Okay, the motion passes with 2 noes.
Okay. Also, too, I want to reaffirm to everybody that I really appreciate the dialogue and the discussion, work on staff. This is what we're here to do, and it's been done in a respectful way. And everybody, this is how we're supposed to do it. Thank you so much for all the comments and input. Yeah. So moving on, we're into reports. Take a break.
10 minutes.
You know what? Hey, let's take a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at 10:56.
Recording stopped.
The pen started there, but it won't. Yeah. And then I was like, oh no.
Recording in progress.
I'll take pinata. Oh my God. Okay, I'm down.
Back in session. For moving on, we've got reports, item 8. I'd look for a motion for items 8. I understand one was pulled, is that correct?
No motion needed, just a presentation for A and B.
Presentation for A and B. Oh, correct.
And then we'll pull the
Sure.
item.
Understand, yes, please. Sorry. Thought it was, say again, what ones are being pulled?
She's
Okay,
she's gonna present.
okay, gotcha. All right, thank you.
Thanks. Good morning, Chair, trustees. Every quarter, the Portfolio Analytics team provides the board with a quarterly performance report for the LACERA Total Fund. The report represents a snapshot in time as with the fourth quarter, ending December 31st, 2024. And twice a year, for the calendar and fiscal year ends, staff presents on 3 key areas of the report. If you'd like to follow along, the presentation does start on slide 252 of your packet. In our presentation, the first element we will cover is performance. John will discuss quarterly and annualized returns for the total plan and functional categories versus benchmarks, including an analysis on contribution to return and asset allocation. The second element we review is risk measurement. Catherine will discuss the key statistics and measurements that we use to review total plan exposures. And third, Catherine will also provide an overview of our quarterly compliance monitor report. Now, beyond what we will present today, the quarterly reports also include detailed information for each sub-asset class and special programs, as well as manager scorecards for every active investment manager in the total fund, which serves as our asset class ongoing manager due diligence tool. Last, there is also a glossary of terms for ease of reference. With that background, let's move to John to start us off.
Thanks, Esme. Good morning, Chair Green and trustees. Before I begin, just wanted to kind of give a definitional commentary. So throughout our commentary today, we will be referring to a commonly used term within investments, the basis point. So by definition, a basis point is 1/100th%. A simple way that I think about the conversion is every 100 basis points equals 1%. And we generally speak in basis points to be precise in communicating percentage changes that we will be presenting today. So with that, we'll start on slide 3 with a review of the total fund's asset allocation. Please note that on the snapshot on this slide represents our interim policy weights approved by the board in April 2024. The next quarter's report will be updated to reflect final policy weights that took effect on January 1st. We ended the year with a total market value of $81.2 billion, a decrease of $400 million from the prior quarter, but a net increase overall of $5.3 billion year over year. In the last 2 columns of the table, we observe our over and underweights by functional category. These temporary allocation differences are expected as we continue to implement our new strategic asset allocation, and trustees should expect these variations to narrow in next quarter's report when portfolio allocations will be compared to final target weights. So the next 2 slides provide a summary of the fund's performance with all figures presented on a net of fees basis, and we'll begin by reviewing our absolute returns, which represent the percentage change in a portfolio's value over a specified period. For the fourth quarter, the total fund experienced a slight decline of 10 basis points, but ended the year positively at 8.8%. Credit was the only functional category to achieve a positive return for the quarter at 3%, while all other categories declined. The contribution to return column within the boxed area of the table shows how each component contributed to the fund, with the sum of these individual percentages equaling the overall fund's net return highlighted in yellow. For some context, a return contribution analysis simply identifies which categories had a positive or negative impact to the fund. And the waterfall chart illustrates these results with positive contributors in dark blue and negative contributors in light blue. While contribution analysis offers some insights, it is limited in indicating whether our investment decisions added value relative to our benchmark. This type of relative analysis, known as return attribution, is on the next slide. So return attribution encompasses a set of techniques used to identify the sources of a portfolio's excess return compared to its benchmark. It enables us to examine the specific time period and determine which investment decisions have either added or detracted value from the fund. The analysis on this slide addresses questions such as whether the excess return was achieved by our asset allocation decisions, the allocation effect, or by our manager's security selection decisions, the selection effect. And the sum of these two effects equals the total value add column in the boxed area of the table. For the fourth quarter, the total fund underperformed its policy benchmark by 144 basis points, highlighted in yellow. During the period, both our allocation and selection decisions detracted by 12 and 132 basis points respectively. And if you look at the bar graph on the right, the category with the largest effect was growth. Although the allocation effect was minimal, growth experienced a significant negative selection effect of 115 basis points. And for background, growth is comprised of three sub-asset classes: global equity, private equity, and non-core private real estate. And the excess returns for these subcategories are shown in the table and are color-coded: green for positive, red for negative. And we can see the main driver of growth's recent underperformance is due to private equity, which lagged its benchmark across various time periods. And as highlighted in Stepstone's presentation during the equity committee meeting, short-term private equity returns have lagged public benchmarks over the past couple of years. And we would think, given that private investment managers incorporate public market comparables into their valuation methodologies to varying extents, one would expect these two markets to move somewhat in tandem. However, this relationship often breaks down during extreme periods. For instance, in 2023, public markets surged like an express train, driven by the rally in technology stocks that reached new highs. In contrast, private markets have been operating more like a local train, with valuations gradually revaluing downward from their inflated 2021 highs and remaining decoupled from private markets. Additionally, this underperformance has coincided with the distribution drought in private markets, as mentioned by Trustee Mee. And investors are facing a lack of distributions at the same time as returns continue to underperform. However, when committing to a private market fund, limited partners recognize that private investing is a long-term strategy with performance measured in years rather than months or quarters. Therefore, if we zoom out from the quarter and the 1 year period to longer time frames where private market returns are better expressed, we observe that LACERA's private equity program delivered a 15.2% return in the 5-year return column. In comparison, right above, our global equity composite returned 10.2%, resulting in a meaningful difference of 500 basis points, or 5%. That said, short-term fluctuations that favor public markets can often overshadow the contributions that a private investments make to a program. It's important to remember that these fluctuations are temporary and our focus should remain on the long term. And with that, I'll now pass it to Catherine to cover risk.
Thanks, John. I'll be tying what John presented on performance with how LACERA's portfolio looks from a risk perspective. Starting from the boxes on the top left, you have the total fund market value at $81.2 billion and value at risk. Value at risk is a calculation that tells you up to how much the portfolio can lose within a given year. The risk levels for each functional category were generally lower than the benchmark, so the total fund value at risk number is also lower compared to the benchmark. The risk levels reflect how diversified the total fund is. The policy benchmark is a blend of public and private asset classes, and the total fund portfolio is no different. The fund's exposure on the right-hand side shows this balance. The diagram shows LACERA's portfolio across active and passive, private and public, US and non-US mandates. The total fund is actively managed to adjust for market volatility. Public and private market exposure is evenly balanced. and their security diversification with a majority in US markets. The bottom left-hand panel shows total fund volatility, benchmark volatility, and active risk relative to the benchmark. The risk percentages use historical data to forecast risk 1 year forward. Volatility or standard deviation tells you how much the portfolio can fluctuate from the 1 year return. Overall, LACERA is taking less risk than the benchmark with total fund volatility at 9.5% and benchmark volatility at 9.7%. Active risk for the total fund is within expectations at 1.02% and in line with pension peers. Active risk is based on two components. Allocation risk is based on the strategic asset allocation and how it's implemented. A 12 basis point allocation risk is equivalent to 0.12% as of December 31. Allocation risk has gone down considerably since LACERA rebalanced to its final policy weights in January 2025. Selection risk is based on manager decisions against their benchmark. Most of the active risk is coming from selection risk, which ties to the selection effect we saw in the total fund return attribution. The donut chart in the bottom middle shows the contribution to risk by functional category. The bar chart to the right shows the diversification of the total fund across various asset classes. The board-approved strategic asset allocation is working as designed. You can see credit and risk reduction accounting for 1/3 of the total fund allocation, but only marginally contributing to risk at 6%. This slide for the compliance monitor shows the total fund compliance as of December month end. The purpose for the compliance monitor is to continually assess and monitor compliance across three main dimensions. One, strategic asset allocation focuses adherence to our investment policy statement. Focusing on the top and bottom thirds of the page, you'll see where we are compared to the board-approved allocation weights as of December 31. Importantly, the functional and sub-asset class categories are in line. Two, the monitor also reports on program guidance compliance, which ensures that board-approved structure review guidelines are met. And three, we report on investment manager guideline compliance, which measures investment guideline adherence to contractual agreements. The middle section of the report highlights the program and investment manager compliance. Here, you'll see two terms that are used throughout the report: advisories and exceptions. Advisories are for informational purposes only. They serve as monitoring measure and do not indicate compliance exceptions. Exceptions denote instances where investment activity may temporarily fall outside of predefined guidelines, such as during strategic portfolio transitions. This slide for special programs and investment operations highlights are things that arise from our investment activity. At the top, we have proxy voting data as of December 31, reflecting our corporate governance on behalf of the fund. Below that, you'll find information on key programs. Beyond overseeing our core investment activity, we ensure that these supplemental projects and programs are well integrated, generating additional value and further enhancing the total fund. This concludes the total fund presentation, and we'd like to open up for any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. The last slide, when you talk about voting and things impeding voting, what would be an example? I mean, it doesn't look like there's a lot, but.
These are for the securities that we have the ability to vote on. So you can kind of see the regional breakdowns by the map that's shown in the middle.
Right, under the Europe identifying that one meeting wasn't voted on due to impediments. Like, I'm just curious, like what would?
Typically, that's an impediment having to do with our custodian, where a contract wasn't timely in terms of getting the vote in. It's an operational impediment.
Yeah, thanks for including this slide. There's a lot of value in this. We talked about this in the last meeting with the need for this to keep our interests in line with our strategy for DI and whatnot. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Thanks, you guys, for the presentation.
They're gonna do the next one as well.
Oh, okay. Well, without further ado.
So, one second. So similar to the introduction I provided for the pension fund, the portfolio analytics team also provides the board with the quarterly performance report for the OPEB Master Trust. The flow of the presentation will follow the three key areas we discussed earlier: performance, risk, and compliance. And this presentation starts on slide 331 of your packet. With that, John, will you start us off?
Morning again, Chair Green and trustees. I think the first two slides, I'm gonna keep it brief. It's the format is the same as the pension. So we start with the asset allocation. We have the absolute return contribution analysis, and the return attribution is where I want to kind of spend most of my time. So for this slide, the asset allocation, the trust closed with a total market value of 4.4 billion. And that was an increase of 63 million from the prior quarter and 900 million year over year. So the policy allocations you see are interim policy weights, and next quarter's report will have the final target weights. So for the fourth quarter, OPEB declined by 1.8%, but ended the year positively at 9.6%. And like the pension, credit was the only functional category to achieve a positive return for the quarter at plus 40 basis points. To reiterate, and as a recap, a return attribution table, again, is generated to identify the sources of our excess return compared to our benchmark. And the two primary sources, again, are the allocation effect and the selection effect. And the sum of these two effects equals the total value add column in the boxed area of the table. At the total fund level, it's highlighted in yellow. For the fourth quarter, the trust underperformed its policy benchmark by 128 basis points. Trustees will note that this entire amount can be attributed to the selection effect, which is approximately the same percentage. And looking at the bar graph on the right, 3 out of the 4 functional categories experienced the negative selection effect, and that's growth, credit, and real assets. These same 3 categories are where OPEB's private market investments are held. And for background, OPEB's private markets program is currently advised by Hamilton Lane, who was selected and approved by the board in August of 2022. The program is still in its early stages. We've committed $544 million in total commitments, but only 94 million has been drawn down, or 2% of the trust as a quarter end. And part of implementing a private markets program includes updating our policy benchmarks to incorporate the private market components. And more importantly, added private market strategies are now assigned a target weight, both in their respective functional categories and policy benchmarks. So if we could use an example of real assets, the category with the largest negative selection effect of 61 basis points for the quarter. Real assets is comprised of 4 sub-asset classes, the largest being private real estate. At present, however, this sleeve is predominantly invested in a legacy public markets passive REIT strategy. And REIT stands for Real Estate Investment Trusts and consists of publicly traded securities of companies that own and or operate income-producing real estate assets. So the structural disconnect between our legacy public markets portfolio and now our new private markets policy benchmark is what's driving the large negative selection effect. It's not on this page, but for context, the public REITs index for the quarter declined by 6%, while our private real estate policy benchmark was flat. And that's what resulted in the portfolio's underperformance for that component. So in essence, these negative effects that you see in the bar graph are less about manager selections and security selection. It's more about a temporary structural disconnect. And we expect these effects to dissipate as we transition from public to private investments that become fully invested over time. Similar structural transitions are taking place in growth and credit that explain the negative selection effects in their respective categories. And now I'll pass it to Catherine to cover risk.
Thanks, John. So building on what John mentioned, we're continuing to work towards the strategic asset allocation with a board-approved 20% allocation to private markets. The top right diagram shows where the OPEB trust stands today. 98% of the OPEB portfolio is in passive and public markets with an 81% allocation to the US. On the left-hand panel, the value at risk, standard deviation, and active risk percentages speaks to this phenomenon. Both the value at risk and standard deviation for the portfolio are slightly higher than the benchmark because of lower asset diversification. The policy benchmark is a blend of public and private market assets, and the OPEB trust is heavily weighted to public markets at 98%, but this will evolve over time. Nevertheless, the OPEB trust is diversified across the 4 functional categories as displayed in the bottom right chart. This slide is very similar to what we covered earlier in our review of the pension fund, and it provides a snapshot of the quarterly compliance review for the OPEB trust as of December month end. As we can see on this page, OPEB portfolio allocations are in compliance with their respective asset class policy bands. Similar to the total fund, on the next slide, we show highlights on special programs and the investment operations within OPEB. With that, we're happy to stand for questions. Thank you.
Anybody out there in Cyberland? Yeah, I think I understand more getting through the OPEB here with your this slide specifically with the graph on the right there. And again, this goes to what you were talking about with the transition in between public and private. So that this is showing that the allocation outside of that target 12.5 to 20.5, right? That's a byproduct of this transition period. Is that correct?
Yes. In terms of the compliance, there was one exception with a higher manager concentration, but that will change as we continue to build out the private markets program.
Gotcha.
With Hamilton Lane.
Yeah. Thanks, you guys. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you.
On items, we have one report pulled. I would entertain a motion on items 8. You just okay. So so we can move on to the.
Misty had a question regarding that item for February.
Okay, I understand. So items C through Echo on 8, C through Echo will receive and file. Thank you for compiling the reports. We have one report pulled, which is item 8F for discussion and questions. And I would like to, on this topic, I have to make a point of order that there is information. This is a publicly discussed item, but there's information in the communications that should not be discussed publicly, the confidential documents. Am I fair to say that?
Yes.
There's a privilege report in this.
It's a privilege report under the Brown Act. It's a public agenda item, but per the Brown Act, we're allowed to provide you with privileged information, which we've done in this report. I'm happy to answer questions, however, on it, provided they don't get into privileged information. For example, there are references to sensitive BOR closed session items on there and other sensitive issues that we would not want to mention publicly.
Okay, thank you for the clarification on that. So if as long, we can continue with the questions and discussion as long as we keep that in context. Miss Me, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you for pulling the item. I do have a question. Can we look at the slide, look at the materials on page? Let me see what page
is it in the confidential report, Miss Me? Is it
whole report? The whole report is just fiduciary duty and fiduciary counsel contact and a building report. Is that confidential?
Yes.
I thought it's in the open section.
Yes.
Yes.
Miss Me, I have to be very clear that the stuff that's provided in the report is privileged information, and as a point of order, we cannot discuss it in an open session.
So I cannot ask any question on this item that is on the open session?
Trustee, if I might,
yes,
Chair Green, trustees and trustee Me, you can ask general questions about this report. I wouldn't discourage that. However, in the contact report at the bottom of page 2 and on page 3, the summary of issue, many of those are sensitive and confidential and should not be discussed in open session.
So if that's the case, may I make a suggestion for future, should we include this one in closed session rather than include it in open session?
We can't include it in closed session for several reasons. One reason is a lot of it doesn't relate to an item that's a closed session exemption. It's just simply privileged. And the second item is that some of these items would not be appropriate for BOI closed session because they're within the BOR's area of jurisdiction and matters that the BOR is handling.
Our job is to read the materials that are presented in front of us and ask questions. That's our trustees' job. We ask questions if we have any on the materials presented in front of us. Since this is presented in open session, I don't have any other choice but ask my own questions. So we'll leave it up to you.
Ms. Mead, as a point of order, there is nothing to be discussed in that privilege memo at this time.
Chair Green, maybe a little bit of additional context would be helpful. This report is prepared pursuant to a fiduciary council policy that was adopted by the joint boards in 2018. One of the requests in the policy is that staff provide a monthly report to the chairs and copy to all the trustees. We've been doing this for a number of years and have not had. There's this historical understanding that we comply with the request that's made in the policy, but that we don't discuss privileged matters in open session.
Remember, I called this item before in past meeting, asked question on this particular item in the past. In my 1 year or so service, I don't know how that happened in the past, but I did one time. This is the second time I look at the report, I want to ask question. So I have question. However you think that my question can be answered, I need answer.
Okay, Ms. Mead, just to clarify, and if you review and look at item 8F in the paragraph, privilege and confidential attorney-client communications, exempt from disclosure. And if you ask questions regarding the privilege report, it could possibly affect your obligation under the Brown Act. And before we move on, so I would recommend that if you have specific questions regarding the report, that you could possibly speak directly with legal counsel on the specific questions you have, but it cannot be done in open session. It is a point of order.
Totally fine. I can do that too.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Ryu.
I was going to make that point. If Trustee Me could talk to Steve separately, since it's closed, confidential matter.
And Ms. B, absolutely. We want to support your pursuit of information, and so please understand that as a trustee, absolutely. Have the autonomy to go to the legal department to discuss this, but unfortunately, in this forum right now, it's not appropriate or legal.
Understood. I'll talk to Mr. Rice outside the meeting.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Meek. Anybody else have anything on that? I'd like to move on to item 9. Items for staff review. I would like to. Mr. Rice, if you could stay forward, and I hope I'm in order here. I believe a motion is in order to discuss possibly under the Governor's Emergency Act as far as the scheduling and in-person acre committee tomorrow. I have a concern. Is this the appropriate place for that motion?
That motion would be appropriately made tomorrow morning at the Acre Committee meeting itself. Under the Brown Act, that would be the Acre Committee is a separate legislative body, and since the board hasn't previously the board's prior action has already expired, I suggested it be handled by the Acre Committee in the morning. The declarations of emergency that the governor issued related to the fires are still in effect, so we can still invoke a teleconference meeting for tomorrow, but the way to do it would not be now, but would be to do it in the morning. And be the first item that would be addressed at the meeting tomorrow.
Okay, just for a point of information, I understand what you're saying. So the concern would be having individuals driving in the weather. How would that?
We can take the vote. The process under the Brown Act requires that the first time a body, and this would be the first time the Acre Committee is addressing this issue, the first time a body seeks to invoke the emergency exception, they can do it via teleconference. So we'll have a teleconference meeting. The first item of business will be for the rest of the meeting to proceed via teleconference.
Okay, understand. And so but I would like, this is, because of the updated report on the weather and my concerns with folks commuting it, how would we recommend that we survey to staff and board on the Acre to find out if they could drive in or not?
I think that's something that the board executive assistants or the administrative assistant for internal audit would normally do.
Okay, so Linda's going to send an email out. Thank you for.
I would also suggest that Richard Bendel be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Consulted.
I've even talked to Richard. I'd like to speak with him too because of the work that his staff did, but I do have a strong concern with the weather.
Yeah, it would it would be in order and proper under the Brown Act for the Acre Committee to approve a teleconference meeting if it feels it's necessary and can make the required findings.
But so I understand it would have to be though tomorrow during these open as it opens.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
Thank you. So today is a very special day because it is the birthday of my daughter and our chair and significantly our board secretary. I'm going to celebrate with my daughter tonight. Mr. Chair, I love you, but I'm going to focus my comments on our board secretary.
I cannot confirm or deny.
I have been in and out of politics and government for 33 years, and I have served on countless boards, commissions, committees, legislative blue ribbon panels, all sorts of things. And I can say truly that we have the absolute best board secretary on the planet. No joke. I mean, she is so on the ball, just so organized. I feel like, if she went to another agency, we would conquer the world. I'm serious. So we are very, very lucky to have her. And on birthdays, it's typical that we say some nice things. And so I will just say that LACERA and this board are very lucky that you were born. We are very, very lucky to have you. Yeah. And thankfully, I won't say. Yeah.
You want to call the roll?
Yes.
Good meeting. Happy birthday, everybody. And yes, Linda is very, very special. And we appreciate her very much. Though, like Trustee Gatto said, we still love our chair, though, and our ex-chair up there. Anyway, have a good day and be safe.
Thank you. Ms. Ginsburg?
Happy birthday
Thank
to
you.
everyone. And I want to thank staff for all the work that they did for today's meeting. Very informative. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Rue?
After what Trustee Gatto said, I mean, what can you say, right? Goodness. But you know, he's probably gonna go home and say the same thing to his daughter.
You know, listen, they are both tremendous people, and seriously, yeah.
So he's practicing.
But my daughter has not contributed much to LACERA.
So happy birthday and happy birthday to the chair. Thank you to staff for all the hard work, and you know, no way you could top Mr. Gatto, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Langton.
Thank you. I join the sentiments about Linda. She's amazing. I tell her all the time. Happy birthday to you all. And I just want to transition to give a shout out to someone at LACERA. His name is Alan Wu, and he works in benefits. So this might have been better served last week, but here I am. A few months ago, one of my legal colleagues contacted, happened to be Alan, who answered, and this is a very discerning individual who is ready to retire. He said, he called me after the session and said, I want to tell you what a great job Alan Wu did with explaining my benefits to me. So I just, you know, put that in my head. This was 2 months ago, and I thought, oh, at some point I'm going to have to say something. Well, on Saturday, I was at a Asian lunar party, and Alan was there. And I didn't know it was him, but he came over and introduced myself. And I sat next to him and we watched this Pacific Islander fashion show together, and we had a really fun time. And he won a prize, which is great. And I genuinely felt like Alan had such a wonderful personality. He was so kind, and he was just so supportive, noticeably supportive of others around him, very respectful. And so when I got home, it hit me that this was Alan Wu, because I didn't ask him his last name on Saturday. And I finally put it together, and I looked on the, you know, email to make sure his face was the right face. So I just wanted to say thank you to Alan for his hard work.
Thank you, Ms. Mee.
Wow, happy birthday, everyone. Happy birthday, Linda. I know you're turning 21 this year. You know, love you. Yeah, appreciate having you every single day, and thank you. And thank you for the whole board for very great discussion, productive discussion, you know, every time. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Likewise, happy birthday. I can verify for all chairs present and all chairs past how absolutely essential Linda is. Probably the only person you don't mind receiving a 10 p.m. text message from about something that you've failed to respond to, or that you need to get in through there. But just appreciate her professionalism at every level. So happy birthday to you. Enjoy your birthday. And then just likewise, just a great meeting by staff. Appreciated all the work that goes into continuing to improve upon our goal of being best in class. I know it's not easy all the times. There's you know, we've got a number of evolving new board members here, and I only say that as the guy with a little bit of gray stubble after only 4 years. I used to blame my daughter for my salt and pepper hair. Now I get to blame LACERA. But otherwise, just looking forward to closed session and a positive quarter. And then lastly, for all of the hoopers that are out there who truly appreciate what March Madness is relative to our LACERA March Madness, go Duke.
Thank you.
You want me to close?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, since we're telling on everybody, and the, you know, about birthdays and whatnot, and also the gushing, and also someone that's very crucial to the mission here at LACERA is Bonnie. If you're listening, and I know you are, you're not off the hook. All right. So I won't identify her birthday, but she just had one pretty darn recently.
Yeah, we have
So
3 days apart birthdays.
So, and, you know, all the sentiments for Linda on this board and Bonnie, and, you know, yeah, efforts that you guys do. And like Mr. Jones says, the reminder texts are like basically, kicking underneath the table, so to speak, is so important.
Stalking is what I call it.
Yeah, we do too. So, but anyway, so thanks to Bonnie too, and everything, and Linda, yes, happy birthday. I'm also, turning 21 myself. So, yeah, great meeting, everybody, staff, everybody putting stuff together. Really, we are best in class. I mean, and moving towards whatever threshold that, we get to hang that badge on. It's apparent from our risk management process to the work staff does, the robust discussion, all of it. So it's very appreciated. On a safety note, I do want to identify for all folks, especially if you're in a high risk area, in the recent burn, we have a upper level support atmospheric river, and it's going to be pretty significant. I want to remind everybody that ready, set, go. If you're in one of those areas, and just, be careful out there. They're talking for a significant amount of water coming down. So please, everybody, tell your friends and family about it if they're not aware. And there is information on that Ready, Set, Go on the LA County website, and especially if you're in one of the burn scars areas. So outside of that, not to try and end on a negative note, but anyway, the staff.
Closed session.
No,
They don't have any.
Staff, there's nothing for good over the door. All right. Okay, we go to closed session.